Greetings. Welcome to Writers on Writing. This broadcast of Medgar Evers College Radio is paid for by Medgar Evers College. This is Writers on Writing, and I am your host, Dr. Brenda Greene. I am the founder and executive director of the Center for Black Literature, director of the National Black Writers Conference, and a professor here at Medgar Evers College. Writers on Writing comes to you every Sunday and gives you, our listening audience, an opportunity to hear writers from the African diaspora talk about their work, their lives, and their craft. And I'm very pleased to have with me in this virtual space the award-winning author, Donna Hill. Welcome, Donna. Nice to see you, Donna.
How are you?
Good, good. So Donna Hill.
See you too.
Okay. This is a broadcast that's going to focus on your recent book, Confessions in B Flat, but I'd like to share with our listening audience some background information about you. Donna Hill is a multi-genre author with more than 90 titles to her credit. She is considered one of the early pioneers of African American romance, that genre, and she's also written mystery and women's fiction. 3 of her novels have been adapted into the screen. She has also been featured in Essence, the New York Daily News, U.S. Day Today, Today's Black Woman, and Black Enterprise, among others. She's received numerous awards for her body of work, which, as I said, cross several genres. And these include the Career Achievement Award. She's the first recipient of the Trailblazer Award, the Zora Neale Hurston Literary Award, and the Gold Pen Award, among others. As an editor, she has packaged highly successful novels and anthologies, 2 of which were nominated for awards. And Donna Hill is also assistant professor of professional writing in the Department of English at Medgar Evers College. So Donna, you have written, as I said, it's an award-winning book. It's a little bit of a departure from your genre, Confessions in B Flat. I'm holding up this cover because it is a beautiful cover of the protagonist of this book. And let's begin with you sharing with us what motivated you to write Confessions in B Flat, and how is this a slight departure from your other books?
Well, I'll answer the last part first.
Okay.
It's somewhat of a departure because it's more of a period piece, something that I don't generally do. I usually write very contemporary work. So that's the part of it, that's the departure. It still has the element of a romance, a love story, that's part of the story. What motivated me to write the novel goes back like a really long time. When I think about it, I've been asked about this and I try to, be succinct about what it was. And it was a variety of things. So the story didn't come to me full blown, like many of the novels that I write. I know that this is what I want to do. The story started out only as a title, probably about 10 or 15 years ago. And the title was B Flat. That's all that it was. And I envisioned a story about a community that came together every Friday night and came to this apartment B to talk about community events and things that were happening. And so, and then the story kind of sat there for a while and I didn't think about it too much and I kept writing. And then ultimately, as the ideas came for the story, I wanted to do something different with the Romeo and Juliet trope of, 2 warring families. But I knew that I didn't want it to be family, just per se. And because I'm sort of a political nerd, I knew I wanted it to be about politics. And growing up, one of the sort of major events during my formative years was the civil rights movement. And so that whole era, from the events that happened during that time to the music and the community and what it was like, all sort of factored in. And I knew that this was the time period that I wanted to focus on. And I wanted it to be about some sort of political event. And rather than have my characters at odds because of their families, they were at odds because of their political ideologies. One is a follower of Malcolm, and one is a follower of Martin Luther King. And then I wanted to twist that a little bit more, and make my heroine a follower of Malcolm, and my hero a follower of Martin Luther King. So once I got those ideas sort of began to take shape, then I started doing a lot more research in terms of the time period and what was happening and some of the highlights, during that particular time, because the story runs from 1963 to about 1968. So that's kind of like how it came together. Came together in fits and starts and bits and pieces over a
It's
number of years
interesting,
before I
yeah.
actually sat down.
It's
Yeah.
interesting that you said it didn't come to you full blown, because I would not imagine stories coming to you full blown. We're going to come back to that. But I want to go back to the title, because when I saw B Flat, I thought about the character in a movie that I watched recently, Sophie's Song, and the nickname was B
Yeah.
Flat. And I kept saying, well, this has to do about the music. And I kept looking for references to B Flat in the book, but I didn't come to me, although you had so much music in the book, and reading it, it brought back so many memories, because I am also one who grew up during the civil rights era, and I could hear the music in the background. And I thought about those differences in the ideology between Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. It's interesting you made, as you said, you made the woman, Malcolm X, the more fierce, and Jason,
Mhm.
Martin Luther King. Tell us a little bit more about the formation of those characters, because they also not only are different in ideology, they come from different backgrounds.
Yeah. So because the story centers around the civil rights movement itself. I knew that one of the spaces that I wanted to cover was the South, and the home of Dr. King, which was in Georgia, Atlanta in particular. And in the research that I'd done, Pascal's restaurant was one of the places that a lot of the activists during that time used to come and talk and gather. So I knew that was the space that I wanted to showcase. And because my character was a follower of King, he came from that space. Malcolm was here in New York. He was in Harlem, and so Harlem became my other location. And so you have sort of these opposites, the North and the South, and you have a nonviolent and by any means necessary type of ideologies. So you have these constant, sort of tug of war. And so the characters basically not only embody their political beliefs, but their spaces as well. And they bring that to the page also.
And those spaces were familiar. And I have to say, as I was reading it, I went back and looked up Pascal's. And then you reference a record
Yes.
store. You know, so again, those are spaces that we didn't have. Riding on the subway, what that was like for Jason, the character. And I thought about my family members who came from the South and what it was like riding that subway. You know, that was something that people feared. So it really touched
Yeah.
me in many ways, and it really gives us a really authentic portrayal of what it was like to grow up as a black person in America and New York City, and the kinds of issues that were
Hmm.
faced. You know, so just going
Yeah.
back,
Yeah.
to the book. One of the things that you do in the book, you reference places. You give us some of the scenes, some photographs, some commentary on what was happening, and I think that is very, very important, particularly given what we're going through now. As an instructor, a professor, were you motivated because of what you see happening in our classrooms? What motivated you to integrate those photos and the literature that you integrated into the book?
Um, you know, because I am creative in that way, I think that, you know, to your point about, you know, being a professor and what you bring to the class, I mean, it's easy to just, well, here, read this text, you know, we're going to talk about it and that's it, you know, and write a paper. But what I always try to do is to sort of do, you know, a multimodal approach to teaching. What images are going to bring this text alive? What soundtrack is going to bring this text alive, so that it allows the student as well as, you know, my reader to be able to connect in that way. Um, and so I thought, I don't think that when I first started, I said, oh, I'm gonna, you know, put pictures in here. It's sort of, it was very organic. There were instances when I said, you know, this would be really good if I had an image of this. And then I started searching for the images. And as I did that, I realized that this was actually going to become something that was going to be integral to the story. So I guess I took some of my, you know, my classroom stuff and put it put it in the book, because there's parts. If you get the digital version, you can actually listen to Malcolm's speech. So one of his speeches is in there.
Well,
For people to actually
you've
hear.
given us the book of the future. You know how to do that. So along with the book of the future and the themes that are enduring, you know, the love story, the love interests, and the themes around the ideology, this book is relevant today. How would you say it interfaces with what we're going through on Black Lives Matter movements, the social justice movement, even the criminal justice system? How does it interface with that? And how do you help to bring that to light for your readers and for your students?
I think that I don't think initially it was something that I consciously did. But as I began to, you know, continue to, you know, see what was happening, um, the civil rights movement and all of the activists during that time were a prelude to the Black Lives Matter movement. And as you know, the constant tearing down of our leaders, the struggle, all of these elements and obstacles that we're continually fighting against as people of color, they may have waned, but they remain. So that even today we see those same things happening. Then, you know, we had to wait for the newscast to come on, or we had to wait to read it in the newspaper. Now it's instantaneous. You know, we can pick up our phone and we can see exactly what's happening in any part of the world. So I think that the novel, while it takes place in the 60s, is sort of a mirror image of what's happening now. That we're still in this struggle, that continues, 50 years later. And that there will always be those that are going to rise up, as my characters did, and the people in the 60s, and now, the leaders that we have today.
So you described your this novel as not being full grown. Just takes us to your writing process. What is your writing process? And related to that, you are crossing different genres. You write essays, you do short stories, you've done screenplays. How do you move from one genre to another? How is that challenging? But first, what is your writing process like?
I probably shouldn't share my writing process, Dr. Greene, because my writing process is chaotic, to say the
But
least.
that's okay, because people need to hear that it's okay to be chaotic. You know, people have different
Yeah.
processes, and as I said, you are a phenomenal woman. You're an instructor. You're an essayist. You are a novelist. You are pursuing your doctorate. You're just doing all these things, and you're holding it all together. So we need to hear how you do that and what that process is like. Yeah, I think.
Well, I there's always a story in my head somewhere, and it may not be something that I can see from beginning to end, but there's always ideas that are constantly brewing. A lot of what I do and write is out of um, uh, requirements, right? Because I write for several publishing houses, and um, I have deadlines, so I have to write. And but I write what I want to write. I write what I enjoy, and I think that is probably the key. Earlier in my career, um, i- in publishing, they want to be able to sort of keep you in a lane, right? This is the kind of writer that you should be, and you should only do these things. And I knew for me that I had the ability and the desire to do more than just one thing. And so I created my own lanes. If I wanted to, write a proposal, that's what I did. I wanted to try my hand at being able to do that. I wanted to, write a grant. So I would write a grant. If it was writing articles for newspapers and magazines, which I did before I was doing, novel writing, that's what I did because there were things that I wanted to be able to say. And I did not want to be constrained by someone saying, well, this is the only thing that you can do. Um, and that's fine for me. There are other writers that this is all I write. This is what I do, and this is what I specialize in, and that's fine. In terms of shifting gears from one thing to the other, I don't know if it's anything that's really conscious. I'm writing syllabi this week in the morning, and then in the afternoon, I'm working on this book that's due in a couple of months. And then I'm doing, I'll switch over and I'll read
We're going to keep going because it looks like.
by having multiple things. Just probably just doing one thing all the time, I would get very, very bored. And so it works for me, to be able to do multiple things at the same time. I don't generally work on two books at the same time, but I'll be working on two ideas at the same time.
How old
Um,
were you when you first
and so,
started
and,
writing?
and, and, you know, that works for me.
Okay, how old were you
Yeah.
when you first
You
started
know,
writing?
and oh, wow. When I very first started writing, I wrote my very first story that I got paid for when I was probably about 11 or 12.
Wow.
Because yeah, because my girlfriends at school knew that I loved to write. And so I would write love letters for them to give to their boyfriends. And I would string together song titles to make these letters. And they would pay me for it. You know, they pay me $1 or they buy me lunch, you know, or things like that. So, you know, so I kind of cut my teeth back then. And then, of course, you know, when I was coming into my teens, you know, during the whole Vietnam War, you know, I wrote a lot of poetry back then. I didn't attempt to, you know, publish any poetry, anything like that. But that's when I started writing poetry, and I was able to actually kind of like dip back into that well and add original poetry to this particular novel. So you know, so I guess I've kind of like always been writing, you know, one thing or the other
I
from when I
see.
was like 11, 12 years old.
Well, you started so early, and one of the things I like to hear from writers is the whole concept that when you are writing, you actually are in conversation with other writers. I mean, your reading is related to your writing. So I'm asking two questions. Who are the people who you may be in conversation with when you're writing? And are there any particular readers who have influenced you, other writers, other readers, other texts?
Um, that was always that trick question that you ask me. Um,
Yes, we've been down
am
this
I
road before, haven't we?
yes, and I'm like, okay, what did I say? um, in terms of like, conversations with other writers, I think um, more about engaging in um, different styles. Because when I read, you know, before a long time ago, before I was, you know, published and you know, started teaching and things like that, I would read just for pure entertainment. But now when I read, I'm always wondering, how did they do that? You know,
Reading like a
how did
writer.
oh that's a yeah, like how is that, you know, how did she make that word work there? So those are the things that you know, I think about. Like right now I'm doing a lot of I don't have a lot of time to like sit down and like read like I would like. So I listen to a lot of readings, different novels. And that is a whole other kind of experience, especially if they have a really good narrator. And so, you know, I listen for, you know, the rhythm. Um, I listen for the pacing, the way that language is used to bridge the story, and how might I be able to, you know, put my own spin on those types of skills. So I guess, you know, that's the closest I can get in terms of, you know, how I sort of commune with other writers in that way. I'm always fascinated by you know, how other writers can, how do they do that? You know, I'm always wondering, how did they do that? You know, how did they, you know, uh, especially when, you know, I analyze other work for, you know, to write a paper or something like that. And, you know, you break down Sula, for example, and how Morrison uses mirror imaging to showcase her two characters. And being able to realize that and thinking about it now, I'm just getting chills just thinking about how she does stuff, you know, and just like, wow, if I could just like do something like that one day, I'd be so happy. So you know, that way I kind of I think I try to engage with the readers. There was a story, Silver Sparrow, by TRA read years ago. It was very interesting that with the movement of time, and it was extremely subtle, but I was trying to figure out how does she do that? And I read it over and over and over again. And it was so subtle that you could barely see how she moved from one character's perspective to the next without any, breaks in the page or anything.
What
So,
book was that?
just things like that.
Yeah.
And
What was the name of that book?
Silver Sparrow.
Okay,
Silver Sparrow.
So
Yeah,
as we come
yeah.
to
She
a
does
close,
something really good.
you teach writing, you
Mhm.
teach creative writing, professional writing, you lead writers' workshops. What message do you have for emerging writers?
Read. You have to read. You have to read beyond your genre. You need to read nonfiction as well as fiction. And you have to be a student of the world. You have to know what's going on around you, because that's what feeds your spirit and feeds your mind and your ideas, um, by being aware and not, because writing is very solitary, right? You do it essentially by yourself in a room or wherever it is that you go. But in order to get in that space, you have to have something to go into that space. And so you have to be a part of the world, and being able to understand how people operate in the world. And so I study people, their nuances, the way people talk, the way that, three guys will hang out on a corner. It may wind up in a book. So all of these different things. And if you become, so isolated within yourself, then you can't bring the beauty of, the world to your page.
Excellent point. And so I want to encourage our listening audience and our viewing audience to go out and to purchase Confessions and Be Flat, and to visit Donna Hill's website. Give us your website, Donna.
It's DonnaOHill.com.
Okay. So thank you, Donna. Yep. This has been Writers on Writing, and this broadcast is paid for by Medgar Evers College. Remember, the writer is always reading, the reader is always writing. Keep reading and writing. Empower yourselves as readers and writers, and come back next week. Thank you so much, Donna, for this wonderful talk. This is Dr. Brenda Greene signing off. Okay.